Today, we will talk about North Korea, perhaps the most mysterious and unusual country on the planet. This is a country that is almost impossible to enter, about which very little is known, and where all information that reaches the outside world passes through the strictest censorship. Information from there, like drops seeping through a concrete wall, is always incomplete, strange, and at times frightening. Why did this country choose the path of isolation? Why do the citizens of the DPRK live as if it's not the 21st century outside their windows, but an alternate reality cut off from the rest of the world? To understand this, we need to go back in time. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and hit the bell so you don't miss new videos. Brew yourself some tea, grab some pancakes, and let's get started. In the first half of the 20th century, the entire Korean peninsula was a colony of Japan. After World War II, the situation changed dramatically. The northern part of the peninsula came under the control of the Soviet Union, while the south fell under the influence of the United States of America. The ideological conflict that flared up between East and West led to Korea being effectively torn in two. Neither side was willing to make concessions, and as a result, two new states with opposing views on how life should be organized appeared on the map. In the north, the Workers' Party came to power. From the very beginning of the country's existence, its course was clearly socialist. Support was provided by both the USSR and Communist China, which further strengthened the anti-Western direction of development. North Korea has never known any other political system, even for a moment, except socialism. This was not just a choice. It became its very essence. Let us recall the Iron Curtain that surrounded the Soviet Union. North Korea inherited this model but took it to the extreme. Ideology permeated every sphere of life. Closed borders became a way to protect not only against invasion but also against cultural influence. Any opening to the outside world threatened to destroy the system from within. That is why from its very first years North Korea strove for complete autonomy. And even today this can be felt. In the DPRK, it is still not customary to wear revealing clothing, to emphasize individuality, or to speak freely. The main value is considered to be working for the good of society. However, with Kim Jong-un's rise to power, some cosmetic relaxations have appeared. At the initiative of his wife, women were allowed to wear jeans, suits, high-heeled shoes, and earrings. They are also now allowed to ride bicycles, something that used to be grounds for a fine. At the same time, the Constitution of North Korea states that the country belongs to the working people, workers, peasants, and the intelligentsia. However, according to Korea expert Andrei Lankov, in reality, power is concentrated in the hands of a narrow group of party elites. This system is something like a quasi-feudal monarchy. Formally it is a republic, but in essence it is a hereditary autocracy. Since its inception, the country has been ruled by the same family. The first leader, Kim Il-sung, became the founder of the state and built a cult of personality around himself. After his death, power passed to his son Kim Jong-il and then to his grandson Kim Jong-un. Interestingly, none of them formally held exactly the same positions as their predecessor. However, each of them had key powers that ensured complete control over the country. The cult of personality in North Korea is not just respect for the leader. It is deification, enshrined in symbols, slogans, and mandatory portraits in homes and schools. The leader's persona is at once a father, a teacher, a commander, and a source of truth. The country's isolation is largely dictated by the need to preserve this power vertical, since any external influence could shake the people's faith and thus undermine the stability of the system. After World War II, Kim Il-sung developed a unique state ideology, which was later enshrined in the constitution. This system of beliefs is called Juche. To a Westerner, it may seem strange and confusing, but in North Korea it is studied in schools, quoted in universities, and reproduced on every street poster. According to Juche, the driving force of society is the people, but that does not mean that everyone is equal. The leader and the existence of a supreme leader are considered not just normal, but essential. The economy exists not for profit, but to meet the needs of the country and its citizens. National pride is one of the key values. Every person should feel respect for themselves, for others, and for the state. Faith in the leader is the cement that holds society together. In this system, revolution is not only a struggle on the barricades, but also daily labor. Self-reliance is the main protection against external influence. The army is seen not as a threat, but as the people in uniform. From the Juche perspective, isolation is not a sign of fear, but an expression of strength, a desire to preserve one's uniqueness and independence. If you think that punishment in North Korea concerns only the offender themselves, that's not the case. The country has a system known as the punishment of 3 generations. This means that if a person commits a serious crime, especially a political one such as criticizing the government or attempting to escape abroad, not only do they suffer, but their entire family is sent to prison along with them, parents, spouses, and children. Moreover, the next 2 generations, born in captivity, live and die in the camps, never leaving the prison walls. This fact is confirmed in the book Escape from Camp 14, which tells the true story of a person who was born and raised in one of these camps. His family was punished for the actions of other relatives, and for a long time he himself did not even know that a world existed beyond the barbed wire. This is not just punishment, it is a system built on fear, on control through family ties, where every citizen is afraid to even think outside the rules. The life of an average North Korean is far removed from the concepts of rest and leisure. The country has a 6-day work week. But even the 7th day is not a day off, but a time for mandatory, though formally voluntary, community labor. As a result, a person ends up in a constant work mode without any real rest. After finishing school, the state assigns each graduate a workplace, most often for life. Changing professions or moving to another field is practically impossible. There are also more lucrative jobs in organizations involved in international trade or those that bring in foreign currency. But only a select few get those positions, usually through connections or bribes. Thus, for most North Koreans, life is endless labor with no chance for choice or respite. Surprisingly, but true in North Korea, growing, storing, and using marijuana is not only not prohibited, but even encouraged as a healthy alternative to tobacco. This may sound strange, given the overall level of control and restrictions, but marijuana here is considered a poor man's herb, a cheap and accessible substitute for cigarettes. Moreover, the cultivation of opium on unused plots of land is encouraged in the country. Cannabis bushes are often planted along railway tracks, their roots help hold the soil together. However, this does not mean that there is freedom in North Korea. Rather, it is one of many paradoxical exceptions in an otherwise strictly regulated system. In the 1990s, all teachers were faced with an unusual requirement: they were obliged to know how to play the accordion. This instrument was considered folk, patriotic, simple to produce, and accessible under conditions of isolation. Without passing an accordion exam, it was impossible to obtain a teaching certificate. One of the book's protagonists, a schoolteacher, was unable to take the exam on time due to the nationwide mourning over the death of Kim Jong-il. While she waited for another chance, she had to work as a kindergarten teacher. This case illustrates how requirements that seem absurd at first glance can be entirely real under North Korean ideology, where even education is subject to political and cultural symbols. On the border between North and South Korea, a strange city called Kijongdong was built in the 1950s. Its purpose was to demonstrate the advantages of the socialist North. It was meant to be a showcase capable of convincing Southerners to move to the North. Everything was organized to the highest standard. Neat houses, bright facades, illuminated streets, but behind the outward gloss there was emptiness. The buildings had neither windows nor interiors. They were just boxes, standing there for the sake of illusion. Not a single person lived in them. The entire city was a theatrical set. In addition, loudspeakers on the territory of Kijongdong broadcast propaganda around the clock to the South Korean side. In response, the Southerners set up their own speakers and played their own music and news. This sound duel lasted until 2004, when both sides finally agreed to stop it. And although the city still stands in its place today, it remains an empty monument to the era of ideological confrontation. While the rest of the world lives in the year 25, in North Korea it is the 111th year. It's all because of a special calendar system adopted within the country. The count starts not from the birth of Christ, as in most countries, but from the year Kim Il-sung was born. This means that according to the North Korean calendar, the first year began in 1912. The moment the founder of the state was born, this decision underscores the cult of personality that has been elevated to the level of official ideology. The entire country lives according to a new historical axis, the axis of Kim Il-sung's name. The calendar has been rewritten, and everything that happened before the leader's birth is regarded as something prehistoric, irrelevant. This chronology applies to school textbooks, government documents, and even the calendars in people's homes. In this way, North Korea exists in its own time, parallel to the rest of the world. What should you save in case of a fire? The answer will surprise you. In any other country, when there is a fire A person first tries to save their own life and, if possible, the lives of their loved ones. But in North Korea, there is one more mandatory item added to this list, the portrait of Kim Jong-il. This is neither a joke nor an exaggeration. Official instructions require citizens to save images of the leaders right after saving themselves. Moreover, in many homes there are special shelters where the portraits are kept in fireproof cases. Idol worship in the DPRK goes so far that, in case of war, there are bunkers designated for the statues of the leaders. The protection of monuments is equated with the protection of current state officials. Guards in uniform patrol the areas where the bronze giants of the Kims stand. Violating this reverence is considered a serious crime. Even an accidentally dusty portrait can cause problems for the entire family. According to the official biography, Kim Jong-il learned to walk when he was just 3 weeks old. And already at university, according to North Korean sources, he wrote more than 1,500 books and created 6 operas, each of which is considered the greatest work in the history of world music. His athletic achievements are also legendary. In the 1990s, North Korean media reported that, on his first visit to a golf club, Kim Jong-il played 38 holes, scoring 11 holes in one. All of this happened in front of 17 bodyguards. After such a grand success, he supposedly decided to retire from sports in order to preserve his flawless reputation. But that's not all. After the national football team's poor performance at the 2010 World Cup, the players were publicly humiliated for 6 hours. All these facts, which may seem absurd, serve an important purpose to strengthen the cult of personality and demonstrate the leader's infallibility. In North Korea, a myth is not a fiction, but the state tool of governance. Sometimes rumors about punishment methods in the DPRK seem too gruesome to be true. But unfortunately, some of them are confirmed. One of the most well-known cases involves a high-ranking official who was executed for not showing enough grief over the death of Kim Jong-il. He was sentenced to death, and the sentence was carried out with a mortar shell. Yes, that's exactly how it happened. This execution became known to the world, thanks to defectors and testimonies from former military personnel. Of course, such punishments are not applied to every offender, but they serve their purpose perfectly. They intimidate and keep the population in complete obedience. When people know that even a minor misstep can cost them their lives, especially if you are part of the state system, it makes the regime virtually unbreakable. In North Korea, surprisingly enough, elections are held. Every 5 years, citizens go to the polls. However, there is only one name on the ballot. Formally, a voter can vote against by crossing out the candidate's name, but this can only be done in a separate booth that is clearly visible to observers. Thus, if someone actually dares to protest, their actions are recorded and the consequences follow swiftly. This procedure serves an important purpose. It creates the illusion of democracy. On paper, there is a choice, there is participation, there is the right to vote, but in reality, everything is controlled by the state, and the outcome is known in advance. Voting turns into a ritual, a demonstration of loyalty to the system. There is no real competition, no opposition parties, only a single line that everyone is expected to support. There was a time when North Korea's economy was more developed than South Korea's. In the 1950s and 1960s, the DPRK showed steady growth, developed heavy industry, exported goods to socialist countries, and even competed with the South in a number of areas. But everything changed by the 1970s. South Korea bet on the market, technology, and foreign investment, while the North got stuck in a centralized command system and gradually began to lose momentum. Today the gap is colossal. As of 2011, North Korea's GDP per capita was about $1,800 per year, while in South Korea it was over 30,000. These numbers speak for themselves. At the same time, there is hardly anything to buy within North Korea. The market is limited, goods are scarce, and the standard of living remains one of the lowest in the world. The country exists in survival mode rather than development, despite occasional attempts at economic reform. In the digital age, when the internet has become an integral part of life even in the most remote corners of the planet, North Korea remains almost completely disconnected from the global network. There are officially only about 600 registered internet users in the country. This is in a country with a population of millions. Access is granted only to high-ranking officials and students who have passed a special selection process. For everyone else, only the internal local internet, Kwangmyong, is available, a restricted network with state-approved content. The websites are propagandistic, news-related, educational, but all strictly within the bounds of the ideology. The country has also developed its own operating system called Red Star, which is based on Linux. Its design mimics the macOS interface, and control is built in at the kernel level. There are rumors that North Korean programmers are involved in developing malware and have participated in hacking banks, gaming companies, and international platforms such as Sony and Nintendo. However, it is difficult to prove this. In any case, for the average North Korean, global internet access is not just a luxury, it's practically a myth. If you think that concentration camps were left in the past after the Holocaust and World War II, unfortunately that's not entirely true. In North Korea, there are still camps where tens of thousands of people are held. According to reports from Amnesty International, in the 1990s, around 50,000 men, women, and children were detained in one of the largest camps, Horyong. People there are subjected to forced labor, starvation, torture, and even medical experiments. One of the former guards who escaped from the country claims that about 2,000 people die from exhaustion every year, but the total number of prisoners remains stabilized due to constant new arrivals. He also reports that about a third of the inmates have physical disabilities, missing limbs, deformed bones. These camps are not just prisons, but a tool of total intimidation. In addition to Kijongdong, the city of illusions we already talked about, North Korea has another symbol of propaganda. In this city, the tallest flagpole in the world has been erected, flying a gigantic national flag. This is not just a flag, it's a visual statement, a reminder to neighbors of the strength and pride of the North Korean regime. Kijongdong was also equipped with loudspeakers that broadcast slogans, music, and speeches by the leaders around the clock. For a long time, South Korea responded in kind, until in 2004 both sides agreed to stop the audio propaganda. Despite this, the city itself continues to stand on the border, remaining a silent symbol of the attempt to convince the world of the existence of a socialist paradigm. After Kim Jong-un came to power in 2012, cautious but noticeable changes began to take place in the country. He initiated several economic reforms aimed at attracting investment and developing a limited private sector. Cooperative enterprises appeared within the country, new markets emerged, and trade was partially permitted. But all these changes do not alter the essence. The authorities still tightly control everything that happens inside the DPRK. The standard of living remains low, freedoms are minimal, and access to information is strictly limited. The country's isolation cannot be explained by a single reason. It is a combination of fear of losing control, the legacy of the past, and an ideology built on myths and total management. Perhaps one day North Korea will open up to the world, but for now it remains one of the most isolated and enigmatic countries on the planet.